The rope snaps taut at exactly 10:03 a.m. on December 13, 1945, inside Hameln prison, Germany. The trapdoor falls. 22-year-old Irma Grese drops through the opening, her neck breaking with an audible crack that echoes through the execution chamber. She is the youngest woman ever executed for Nazi war crimes. Just 3 years earlier, she had been a dairymaid. This is her story, and I warn you now it's going to be hard to stomach. If you're finding this documentary compelling, consider subscribing. We bring you deep dives into history's darkest chapters because understanding how evil takes root is the only way to prevent it from happening again. On October 7, 1923, in the small agricultural village of Reschen, Germany, a baby girl takes her first breath. Her name is Irma Ida Ilse Grese. Her father, Alfred, is a dairy farmer. Her mother, Bertha, tends the home and 5 children. There is absolutely nothing in this moment that suggests this infant will one day become one of history's most sadistic killers. The farmhouse sits among rolling fields, cows low in the barn. It is ordinary. Completely, unremarkably ordinary. Irma grows up helping with farm chores. She milks cows before school. Her hands are strong from working. She is not particularly bright in her studies. She is not particularly anything. Teachers would later remember her as unremarkable, quiet, slightly below average in her schoolwork. She has blonde hair and blue eyes. She is, by the standards of Nazi racial ideology that will soon consume Germany, the picture of Aryan perfection. But in 1923, in 1930, in 1935, she is just a farmer's daughter in a small village where nothing ever happens. Then, in 1936, everything changes. Irma is 13 years old. She comes home one afternoon and finds her mother on the kitchen floor. Bertha Grese has drunk hydrochloric acid. The suicide is violent and agonizing. Irma is the one who discovers the body. We don't know what those moments were like for her. We don't know what she saw, what she heard, what she felt. What we know is that after this day, something in Irma Grese begins to calcify. Her father remarries quickly. Irma despises her stepmother. She fails out of school at 15. She works as a dairymaid, then in a shop, then in a hospital briefly. She is aimless, angry, looking for something. Germany in 1938 is a country transformed. The Nazi Party has been in power for 5 years. Everywhere there are uniforms, rallies, speeches about racial purity and national destiny. The League of German Girls recruits young women into service of the Reich. Irma joins. She absorbs the propaganda like a sponge absorbs water. Jews are vermin. Slavs are subhuman. Germany must be cleansed. She believes it, completely, without question. In 1942, at age 18, Irma Grese makes a choice. She is not conscripted. She is not forced. She volunteers for the SS. She chooses this. She fills out the application herself. She passes the physical examination. She is accepted for training at Ravensbrück concentration camp in northern Germany. At Ravensbrück, Irma learns her trade. She learns how to control prisoners through fear and violence. She learns which punishments inflict the most pain. She learns that she has power over life and death, and she discovers something about herself. She likes it. In March 1943, at age 19, she is transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau in occupied Poland, the largest killing center in human history. Within months, she is promoted, and promoted again. By the time she is 20 years old, Irma Grese is the Senior Supervisor of the women's section. She controls 30,000 prisoners. She is the youngest person ever to hold such a position in the camp system. For the first time in her life, Irma Grese has real power. She wears it like a costume. Every morning, she braids her blonde hair into elaborate plaits. She puts on her tailored grey uniform with the SS insignia gleaming on the collar. She loops her plaited leather whip through her belt. She laces up her heavy boots. She holsters her pistol. She calls her 2 trained German shepherds to heel. Then she walks into the camp. 30,000 women see her coming and feel their stomachs turn to ice. The prisoners have a name for her. Die blonde bestie, the blonde beast, another name too, the beautiful Beast of Belsen, though that comes later. She is strikingly attractive by conventional standards, clear skin, bright eyes, a smile that could be mistaken for warmth if you didn't know what she was capable of. But you learn quickly. Everyone learns quickly. Picture this. Roll call. 5 a.m., winter morning. Thousands of women standing in the frozen mud in threadbare dresses. They have been standing for hours. Some collapse. When they collapse, Irma walks over. She doesn't help them up. She kicks them with her boots. If they don't get up, she sets her dogs on them. The women, these are mothers, daughters, sisters, professionals, teachers, artists, they scream as the dogs tear into their flesh. Irma watches. She doesn't look away, she doesn't flinch. Survivors will testify that sometimes she smiles. A small smile, like she's enjoying a private joke. The whip becomes her trademark. It is plaited leather, designed for controlling horses. She uses it on human beings. She is methodical about it. She doesn't just hit randomly, she aims. Across the breasts, across the eyes. She wants maximum pain, maximum disfigurement. A prisoner named Gisela Pearl, a Hungarian Jewish doctor who survived Auschwitz, would later testify about watching Irma whip a young woman across the breasts so many times that the flesh hung in strips. The woman's screaming eventually stopped. Not because the beating stopped, because she lost consciousness. Irma walked away disappointed that the entertainment had ended. But the whip is just the beginning. Irma Grese discovers that she has a talent for selecting prisoners for the gas chambers. Every few days there are selections. The sick, the weak, the elderly, children. They are separated from those who can still work. They are told they're going to the showers. They are marched to the gas chambers. Irma volunteers for selection duty. She enjoys it. Multiple survivors testify to the same detail. During selections, Irma smiles. She points left or right with her whip. Left means work, right means death. She points right while eating chocolate. She unwraps the chocolate deliberately, slowly, in front of women who are starving. Then she sends them to die. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. Irma has an affair with Dr. Josef Mengele, the angel of death, the man conducting grotesque medical experiments on twins and dwarfs. They are lovers. They eat together in the SS mess. They walk together in the evenings. What do they talk about? Their day's work? The people they've killed? Do they laugh? In the winter of 1943, a transport arrives from Hungary. Among the prisoners is a 15-year-old girl. Her name is Vera Alexander. Years later, at Irma's trial, Vera will testify about what happened. Irma selected her for special attention, not for work, for torment. Over the course of weeks, Irma beat Vera repeatedly. She set her dogs on the girl. She once made Vera stand at attention for 14 hours in freezing weather because she had found a scrap of paper in Vera's possession. When Vera finally collapsed, Irma dragged her by the hair to the punishment block. Vera survived. Barely. She was 16 years old when she was finally liberated. She weighed 62 pounds. Another survivor, Ilona Stein, testified about the day Irma found her with an extra piece of bread. Irma didn't just confiscate it. She forced Ilona to kneel in the mud. Then she beat her with the whip across the back and shoulders, 50 times. Ilona counted every strike. She had to. Irma made her count out loud. If she lost count, Irma started over. When it was finished, Ilona couldn't stand. She couldn't work for 3 days. In Auschwitz, if you couldn't work, you died. Ilona somehow survived those 3 days. She never forgot that Irma knew. Irma knew that not working meant death. That was the point. But perhaps the most damning testimony comes from a prisoner named Helene Klein. Helene was assigned to work near the crematoriums. She could see the gas chambers from her work detail. One day in the spring of 1944, she saw Irma standing outside Crematorium 4. A transport had just arrived. Families were being separated. Children were crying. Mothers were screaming. The SS were shouting orders, and Irma was watching, just watching. Helene testified that Irma stood there for over an hour. She watched as hundreds of people were herded into the gas chamber. She stayed until the doors were sealed. Then, and this is the detail that Helene remembered with perfect clarity 30 months later, Irma turned away from the building and her face was flushed. Her breathing was rapid. She looked, Helene said, like a woman in the throes of sexual pleasure. Let that sink in. This wasn't an accident, this was deliberate. Irma Grese chose this work. She chose to volunteer for selections. She chose to stand and watch the gassings. She chose to beat prisoners beyond what was ordered or required. Even other SS officers noticed. Even people who ran concentration camps found her disturbing. A guard named Hilda Lobauer later testified that she had complained to superiors about Irma's brutality. The complaint went nowhere. The SS appreciated Irma's efficiency. The SS appreciated her enthusiasm. In January 1945, as Soviet forces advance from the east, Auschwitz is evacuated. Prisoners are forced on death marches westward. Thousands die on the roads. Irma is transferred to Bergen-Belsen in northern Germany. If anything, conditions at Belsen are worse than Auschwitz. Belsen was not designed as a death camp. It was a holding camp. But by early 1945, it is overwhelmed. No food, no water, no sanitation. Typhus is rampant. Bodies are piled in the streets. When British forces finally liberate the camp on April 15, 1945, they find 60,000 prisoners alive and 13,000 corpses unburied. They also find Irma Grese. She is 21 years old. She is calm when arrested. She doesn't try to flee. She doesn't resist. She just stands there in her uniform with her whip in her belt and waits to be taken into custody. The British soldiers who arrest her are stunned by her appearance. She is young. She is pretty. She looks nothing like the monster they expected. The trial begins on September 17, 1945, in Lüneburg, Germany. 45 defendants are tried together for crimes committed at Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. Irma is the youngest. She sits in the dock wearing a dark dress. Her hair is neatly braided. She files her nails during the testimony. She looks bored. Survivor after survivor takes the stand. They point to her. They describe what she did. Gisela Pearl testifies about the whippings. Vera Alexander testifies about the dogs. Helene Klein testifies about what she saw outside the crematorium. Ilona Stein shows the scars on her back. The evidence is overwhelming. Irma's defense is simple. She was following orders. She had no choice. She was just doing her job. The problem is that multiple witnesses testify that Irma volunteered for the worst duties. She chose to participate in selections. She chose to beat prisoners. She went beyond her orders. When asked directly if she ever killed anyone, Irma says no. Technically, she may be telling the truth. She probably didn't kill anyone with her own hands. She selected them for the gas chambers. She set her dogs on them. She beat them until they died of their injuries later. But she didn't personally strangle or shoot anyone. This is the distinction she makes. This is the line she won't cross in her confession. The judge asks her if she feels remorse. She says no. She says she was doing her duty. The judge asks if she understands that what happened in the camps was wrong. She says that's not for her to judge. The judge asks if she ever tried to help any prisoner. She says no. Why would she? They were enemies of the Reich. On November 16, 1945, the verdict is read. Guilty. The sentence is death by hanging. Irma shows no reaction. She is led back to her cell. Over the next 4 weeks, she is kept in Hameln prison. She is allowed to write letters. She writes to her father. The letters are mundane. She asks about the farm. She asks about her siblings. She never mentions what she did. She never apologizes. She never expresses regret. December 13, 1945. Dawn breaks cold and grey over Hameln. Irma is awakened at 6 a.m. She is given breakfast. She doesn't eat it. She is allowed to wash. She braids her hair. At 9 a.m. she is led from her cell. Also being executed today are two other women from the camp. Juana Bormann, age 52. Elizabeth Volkenrath, age 26. They walk ahead of Irma to the gallows. The execution chamber is a converted garage. The gallows are rudimentary. 3 ropes, 3 nooses. British executioner Albert Pierrepoint has carried out hundreds of hangings. He is professional, quick. He believes in making it as painless as possible. Irma walks up the steps without assistance. She is pale but steady. Her hands are bound behind her back. The noose is placed around her neck. The white hood is pulled over her face. At exactly 10:03 a.m. the trapdoor falls. Irma Grese, the beautiful Beast of Belsen, drops through the opening. The rope catches. Her neck breaks. In the official report, Pierrepoint writes that death was instantaneous. She was 22 years old. She is the youngest woman ever executed for Nazi war crimes. But here's where it gets complicated. Was this justice? According to the law, yes. She was tried. She was convicted. She was sentenced according to the legal standards of the time. But was it enough? Can any punishment be enough for selecting thousands of people for death, for beating women until they died, for taking pleasure in their suffering? Irma Grese lived for 22 years. Vera Alexander spent her 15th and 16th years being tortured by her. Ilona Stein carried scars for the rest of her life. Helene Klein had nightmares for decades about what she saw. The 15-year-old girl who was whipped across the breasts until the flesh hung in strips. We don't even know her name. She probably died in the gas chambers or in the typhus epidemic at Belsen. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister. What would justice look like for her? Some argue that Irma's execution was appropriate. She was given a trial which was more than she gave her victims. She was executed quickly, which was more humane than the deaths she inflicted. The law was satisfied. Others argue that 22 years of life, even with those final months in prison awaiting execution, was more than she deserved. She got to see 22 years. She got to eat meals and see sunrises, and feel rain and experience all the small moments of being alive. Her victims didn't. The children she selected for the gas chambers didn't get to turn 13 or 15 or 22. They died afraid and alone and in agony. What drives someone to this? That's the question that haunts everyone who studies this history. Irma wasn't born a sadist. At least probably not. Most people aren't. She had a difficult childhood. Her mother's suicide was traumatic, but millions of people experience trauma and don't become mass murderers. She was exposed to Nazi propaganda. But millions of Germans were exposed to the same propaganda and didn't volunteer for the SS. She chose this. Step by step, choice by choice, she chose this. Maybe it was power. For the first time in her failed, unremarkable life, Irma had power. Complete power. The power of life and death. Maybe that was intoxicating. Maybe that filled some void in her. Maybe hurting people made her feel strong. Or maybe there was something fundamentally broken in her psychology. Maybe witnessing her mother's violent suicide at age 13 damaged something essential. Maybe she was incapable of empathy. Maybe she was a psychopath who found the perfect environment for her pathology. We'll never really know. Irma Grese never underwent psychological evaluation. She never showed insight into her own motivations. She never seemed to question why she did what she did. Even at her trial, even facing death, she maintained that she was just following orders. She was just doing her job. This is the banality of evil that Hannah Arendt wrote about. Ordinary people committing extraordinary atrocities and telling themselves it's just work, it's just duty. But Irma's evil wasn't banal. It wasn't bureaucratic. It was personal. It was intimate. She didn't sign deportation orders from an office in Berlin. She stood in the camp and pointed her whip at individual human beings and sent them to die. She looked into their faces. She heard them scream. She watched them bleed, and she smiled. That's not banal. That's sadism. That's choosing cruelty when you could choose mercy. After the execution, Irma's body was buried in an unmarked grave at Hameln prison. No headstone, no marker, just a plot number in the prison records. Her father requested that the body be returned to the family for burial. The request was denied. She died a criminal and was buried like one. Meanwhile, the survivors had to rebuild their lives. Vera Alexander immigrated to Israel. She married. She had children. She rarely spoke about her experiences. When she did testify at the trial, it took tremendous courage. Facing Irma again, having to recount what happened, it was its own kind of torture. Ilona Stein spent years in displaced persons camps before finally immigrating to the United States. She carried those scars on her back for the rest of her life. Every time she saw them in the mirror, she remembered. Gisela Pearl became a doctor again. She worked in New York. She delivered thousands of babies. She tried to bring life into the world to counterbalance the death she had witnessed. But here's what stayed with many survivors: the question of how. How did Irma become Irma? And more unsettling, could anyone become that? Are there Irmas waiting in all of us, requiring only the right circumstances to emerge? Or was she uniquely evil, an aberration, a monster among humans? The comfortable answer is the second one. She was a monster. She was different. It could never happen again. But history suggests that's not true. It has happened again. It is happening now in different forms. People are capable of extraordinary cruelty when given power over the powerless. That's why we tell these stories. Not to wallow in the horror, though the horror is real and must be faced. We tell these stories because Irma Grese was 22 years old when she died. 22. She lived her entire adult life in the SS. She never had a chance to grow beyond it, to change, to experience remorse. We don't know if she would have. Probably not, but we'll never know. What we do know is that she made choices. She wasn't forced into the SS. She volunteered. She wasn't ordered to beat prisoners across the eyes. She chose to. She wasn't required to watch the gassings. She wanted to. At every point, she could have chosen differently. She could have requested a transfer. She could have shown mercy. She could have done the bare minimum required and nothing more. She didn't. She chose cruelty. Again and again and again. On December 13th, 1945, at 10:03 a.m., justice was served in the only way the law knew how. But no execution could bring back the thousands who died. No trial could heal the trauma of the survivors. No sentence could undo what was done. Irma Grese got a quick death. Her victims got slow ones. She got a trial. They got none. She got to live 22 years. Most of them didn't. That's her legacy. Not her beauty or her youth or even her cruelty. Her legacy is the lives she destroyed, the futures she stole, the children who never grew up, the mothers who died calling for their babies, the women who survived but carried her scars forever. That's what history remembers, and that's why we'll never forget.